everyone. Welcome to the Political Insider. I'm Brett Smith, your humble host. Joining me today is a very special guest and a good friend. He is the president of the Government Accountability Institute, author of multiple New York Times and Amazon #1 bestsellers like Secret Empire, Profiles in Corruption, Clinton Cash, and now Red Handed. Peter Schweizer, thanks for joining us.
Hey, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
And full disclosure, I am the man who spearheaded the graphic novel adaptation of Clinton Cash, just so everybody knows up front, which was also a #1 New York Times bestseller.
It was, and you did an amazing job on that. And I'm hoping we'll do that with Red Handed here, not too distant future.
I'd love to. This is a fascinating book, and unlike Clinton Cash, this one kind of scares me, much more so from the standpoint of corruption and just how vulnerable our leaders are. For those who might not know you or your work, go ahead and give us your elevator speech on your new book, Red Handed.
Well, Red Handed is basically about a concept that Chinese intelligence uses called elite capture. And it's pretty simple. It's based on the notion that they're going to buy off the political and economic leaders in countries. Rather than having to go head to head with them, they're just going to basically lobotomize other countries by forging these relationships, these partnerships, these alliances with the political elites in other countries. And they've done that very successfully in the United States. It involves people on both sides of the political aisle. And we have a situation now where, depending on what China does, we cannot be confident that our leaders are going to make disinterested, dispassionate decisions that are in our best interest because they are so intertwined financially with Beijing.
Joe Biden's been a political hack longer than I've been alive. However, it seems like something really significant and special happened to this man and his family once he became vice president, and it has to do with foreign money, and in this case, Chinese money. Why don't you explain that to our viewers?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the foreign money from the Bidens doesn't come from Germany or the UK or Japan. It comes from the Ukraine, Russia, and of course, China. The China one is particularly troubling because when Joe Biden became vice president of the United States, Hunter Biden went to China seeking deals, and he ended up getting deals, some $31 million that we've been able to trace of those deals. And what's more troubling, though, is not just the amount of money, it's who made those deals happen. And we identified the 4 businessmen who made those deals happen. And each one of them has links to the highest levels of Chinese intelligence. So it's pretty clear this is not just sort of a random act of corruption or self-dealing. This was a concerted effort by Beijing to capture the Biden family. And they've succeeded in doing so because the other revelation in the book, based on the Hunter Biden laptop, is that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden have intertwined finances. When Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, we know that Hunter was paying some of his bills, monthly bills. He was also paying for things like renovations on his home in Delaware. So Joe Biden himself, the president of the United States, was a beneficiary of the flow of this foreign money.
Are there other people in the Biden family that are benefiting outside of Joe and Hunter?
Yes. We know that James Biden, that would be Joe Biden's brother, took in some $2 million from these Chinese deals. Hunter Biden himself pretty much acknowledges or says in some of the communication found on the laptop that, he's sending half of his money on the family. Now that might be hyperbole, maybe it's not half, but it's very clear based on the information on the laptop when we go into detail that he is paying a lot of bills for a lot of people in the family. So this is not a Hunter Biden problem, a Hunter Biden crisis, or Hunter Biden scandal. It's a Biden family scandal, and it goes all the way to the President of the United States.
You say that some of this Chinese money is tied to CCP intelligence. It reminds me of Clinton Cash, where we had Charlie Tree, and we had the Lincoln bedroom, and one of the famous chapters in our book is the Lincoln bedroom goes global. How is this similar, and do you have specific people in the CCP intelligence that you can tie to the Bidens?
Yeah, absolutely. So we named the 4 businessmen. I'll just give you a couple of examples. There's a Chinese businessman named Che Feng who helped secure a deal for Hunter Biden that basically put $20 million into the Biden family pocket. When Feng was making it rain for Hunter in China, he was also business partners with the Vice Minister for State Security. The Ministry for State Security is kind of their KGB, CIA, FBI all rolled into one. So that's problematically immediately because, of course, Feng is now working with Hunter Biden. He's also working with the man who is responsible for recruiting foreign nationals to spy on behalf of China. But it doesn't end there. There's another man named Zhao. He goes by Henry Zhao, has a company called Harvest Global. He helped in that $20 million deal with Hunter Biden. He also wired another $5 million to a Hunter Biden business. And we have the emails that show that money being transferred. Mr. Zhao, at the same time, he was helping Hunter on this money. He was business partners with the family, specifically the daughter of the former Minister of State Security, who ran the entire spy apparatus of China. And then there are a couple of other examples. So yeah, these are very specific, clear-cut examples. And people will say to me, well, isn't everybody in China wired to the spy agency? You can say at some level, but it's very, very unusual to find businessmen who are dealing with the very top ranks of the spy apparatus. And in every case of the deals that Hunter Biden, the Biden family got, it involves a businessman who has exactly those kinds of ties.
That's just unbelievable. This is what scares me more from the standpoint of comparing it to Clinton cash and what the Clintons little system, you know, the global initiative and the foundation. Just this seems really different. And are they different? How is this different? How is the game different from what the Bidens are doing and what the Clintons did?
Well, if you think about Charlie Tree and the fundraising scandal in the 1990s, that money was, of course, going to the Clinton campaign, helping Bill Clinton get reelected in 1996. What we're talking about here is money that's going into the Biden family pocket. So this is not campaign money. This is not money that's going to somebody who's tangentially connected. This is going actually to the Bidens themselves. And what's particularly troubling is not only this relationship, but when these deals start happening, Hunter Biden does something highly, highly unusual. And this has been confirmed, by the way, by the Secret Service. He went to the Secret Service in the summer of 2014 when these deals are starting, and he tells the Secret Service, I don't want Secret Service members traveling with me when I go overseas. Now that is a very unusual request, and anybody who does substantial business in China will tell you, you need to be on guard there for honey traps, for eavesdropping. But here you have Hunter Biden effectively saying, I want to fly solo to China. I do not want Secret Service protection. Some of that, of course, may have been related to the fact that he was taking drugs and didn't want them knowing about it. But the timing of it suggests that it may very well be related to this financial relationship he was developing with these businessmen who were known to be linked to Chinese intelligence.
I'm amazed that the Secret Service would allow that, even though he requested it. I'm just kind of amazed when it comes to just national security and protecting people that they would say, okay, go ahead.
The basic rule is Joe Biden, as vice president or president or anybody else in that position, could request it. The Secret Service is not allowed to grant it. They are required by law to follow them. But if you are a family member like Hunter Biden and you can request it, the Secret Service may resist you. But if you are insistent on it and demand it, they are required to fall back and not provide the protection. So I'm sure there was a lot of pushback, particularly given the fact that he was doing so many international deals in places like Russia, Ukraine, and China. But at the end of the day, if that's what he wanted, that's what he got.
Well, and in listening to you talk about the difference between what the Clintons did and what the Bidens did, it seems to me like the Clintons were a little bit smarter about this from the standpoint of having an insulating institution or body between them and the money. Everything went into the foundation or went into the global initiative, and then it basically just paid out, which is probably technically legal, whereas this went directly into Hunter and Joe Biden's pocket, which is that's really different.
Yes, it is. No, there's no question about it. I think the level of vulnerability as well, because if you remember Charlie Tree and the fundraising, it was several $1 million to the Clintons, but the campaign raised $100 million or more.
Right.
Here we're talking about the Biden family that prior to this really didn't have much wealth. And suddenly they're securing some $31 million in deals that they didn't have before. So their net worth went from a very low number to a very substantial number, courtesy of these deals. So the issue is always one of leverage. What foreign intelligence agencies want over politicians or anybody they're recruiting is leverage. And you are going to have a lot more leverage in the Biden case than you would in the Clinton case, because as you pointed out, there's no mitigating institution like a campaign. It's person to person. It's in their pockets. But second of all, it's such a large sum of money compared to what the Bidens actually had that it gives them the ultimate leverage over the first family.
It's also a lot more money than the Clintons ever received. It's a drop in the bucket in comparison to Charlie Tree. So with Russia and Ukraine, do you have specifics like you have with the CCP intelligence? You have specific people who are putting money into Joe and Hunter's pocket or in the Biden family's pocket?
Yes, so I've talked about this in my previous book, Profiles in Corruption. The book Red-Handed is focused exclusively on China. But in Profiles in Corruption, my previous book, I walk through this. And, look, Hunter Biden was running a veritable United Nations of corrupt actors that were putting money in various pockets of his. When it comes to Ukraine, of course, you had very corrupt oligarchs who put him on Burisma, that energy company board. It was run or owned in part by an oligarch named Kolomoisky, who is a highly suspect, corrupt figure. When you talk about Russia, you know that there was at least $3.5 million transferred into one of Hunter Biden's accounts by the wife of the former mayor of Moscow. She, according to the U.S. State Department and cables, has been linked directly to Russian organized crime. So you have very bad actors there as well. And the problem is with the current invasion of Ukraine by Russia, really the most effective thing that could be done, in my mind, is that we could actually seize the accounts of these Russian oligarchs living or operating in the West that are close to Vladimir Putin, because a lot of them are actually holding Putin's money for him. That's widely known. But that sanction's not going to happen with this administration, because some of those people are people that Hunter Biden was doing business with. And of course, there are other politically connected people that were doing deals with him as well. So it's an enormous problem. And the idea that the President of the United States is going to take a disinterested, dispassionate view to make the best decisions on these kinds of issues and not take into account the conflicts, the connections, and the relationships and the leverage that these foreign actors have over his son is just ridiculous. And people need to be open about it and accept the fact that we have a commander-in-chief that is in this kind of predicament.
Is there anyone else on Capitol Hill right now that's taking money from the CCP?
Yes, there are numerous people on both sides of the aisle that are doing business with Chinese state-owned companies that are also linked to the CCP and the Chinese military. On the Republican side, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader for the Republicans, and likely to be that after the November elections. He's married to Elaine Chao, who is a transportation secretary in the Trump administration. Her family owns a shipping business called Foremost. And they benefit enormously from the largesse and the favoritism of Chinese state-owned companies and the Chinese government. So their shipping business would be destroyed if Mitch McConnell would take actions that the CCP didn't like. Because Foremost Shipping, the family shipping business, all their major cargo ships are built by the Chinese State Shipbuilding Corporation. The financing for the construction of those ships, which is to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, is all arranged by Chinese state-owned banks. The crews to all those ships are provided by China, and a lot of the contracts they have for the goods that they're shipping around the world are provided by Chinese state-owned companies. So again, it's a problem of leverage. And it's important to point out here, China is very pragmatic about this. What they're looking for from these politicians, loosely translated to English, is big help with a little bad mouth. That's how they describe it. And what it means is, if they want to ding us on the Uyghurs, if they want to criticize our human rights policy, that's a little bad mouth. We're fine with that. What they are worried about is the big help. And the big help is basically unfettered access to our technology, unfettered access to our capital markets, and unfettered access in terms of free trade. And if they generally get that from these political figures like Mitch MCConnell and Joe Biden, they don't mind if they criticize them on the Uyghurs. They understand that has to be done to maintain political credibility.
It's how Mitch McConnell saves face. And they keep this whole charade going. I mean, Elaine Chao, I mean, you want to talk about an institution in Washington. How many presidents has she served?
I think she served in 3 or possibly 4 presidential administrations, Republican. She was in the George W. Bush administration as the Secretary of Labor. As I mentioned, she was a transportation secretary in the Trump administration. In the Bush administration, the first Bush administration, she had a position, and I think she might have even had a relatively minor position in the Reagan administration. So she is an institution among Republicans. The problem is she takes a very strong pro-CCP position. She regularly explains away massive human rights abuses, and she argues the solution to everything, to anything that China does, is always engagement. Keep giving them more of the same. And that's, of course, what the CCP wants.
It's bizarre. It's just big. It's big business to these people, essentially. You know, we've also got Pelosi and her husband, who from what I remember, was a big commercial real estate guy. One of the biggest commercial real estate guys in the country, benefited greatly from the '08 crash and all of the REO, the bank-owned homes, all the homes that were taken back, the mortgages that were defaulted on. How is she tied up with the CCP?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Pelosi used to be highly critical of the CCP. When she was first in Congress, she went to Tiananmen Square in the 1990s when she was there visiting, and she actually unfurled a banner criticizing the CCP. The police showed up, they kind of roughed her up and grabbed the banner. And that was her position for a long time. But in the late 2000s, her husband started doing deals in mainland China, and so did her son, Paul Pelosi Jr. Her husband hooked up with an investment fund to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. About 80% of those investments were in mainland China. He was a partner investor in that firm. He also had an ownership stake in a couple of limousine companies that were owned by a friend of his. Interesting story there. In 2007, Nancy Pelosi supported a boycott of the Beijing Olympics. But then the 2 limousine companies that her husband had ownership stakes in got contracts to ferry VIPs around in Beijing during those Olympics. And she changed her position and said, I'm no longer in favor of a boycott. Where she is today, she regularly gives speeches and says, I mean, openly and candidly, yes, China is committing genocide. She uses that word. Yes, they are an aggressive rival to us in the Pacific and are growing their military, but it's more important for us to maintain good relations with them because we have important issues we have to tackle, which is, again, exactly what we were talking about earlier. It's big help with a little bad mouth. Yes, she dings them. She says naughty words about them, but ultimately she's doing their bidding on the issues that matter most to them, and that's what's important to them.
It's unbelievable. This elite capture is what scares me the most about this book. It really terrifies me, and I didn't really even think about it until this book. And I think I started to think about it beyond politicians. If the CCP can perform elite capture on politicians and world leaders, what's them to stop from doing elite capture on Americans who run large corporations or hedge funds and banking? Could people in the Fed, the Federal Reserve, are they susceptible to elite capture?
I think pretty much anybody is that is prepared to sort of look the other way, to be enticed by the money. I have a chapter in the book on Silicon Valley. I mean, these are some of the richest people in the world, people like Bill Gates or Elon Musk. And sadly, what you look that's happening with them is they go on and do interviews and praise the CCP. and say that the Chinese government is more responsive to the needs of the Chinese people than our representative government in the United States. And they say this with a straight face. They talk about how efficient the Chinese government is. Well, of course, if you have a dictatorship, you don't have to worry about civil rights. You don't have to worry about property rights. You don't have to worry about an independent judiciary. And, you know, in their cases, it's a little bit more confusing and troubling because it's not like they necessarily need the money. I mean, they're worth more than $100 billion. I think in their cases, they actually do kind of admire the dictatorial nature of the Chinese regime. So you're quite right. Elite capture is not limited to politicians. It happens in Silicon Valley. I also have a chapter on Wall Street. The biggest investment firms, the biggest investors in Wall Street are also subject to elite capture. And once they gain this leverage on you, they are not going to let go. And you are going to be put in a position where you are going to be required, in effect, to offer big help with little bad mouth, or bad things are going to happen to you.
That's so sad because I like you, I think to myself, these people have all the money in the world. They'll never spend what they have with what they, you know, with the time they have left. And so it's about power. It's about control. It's like listening to Charlie Munger talk about how great the CCP economic system is and how he'd love to have that over here. Or, you know, or like you said, Bill Gates, Justin Trudeau talking about how they can turn their economy around on a dime. And at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, these are communists. These people are habitual liars. Who's to say that the numbers they're putting out, you know, are even real? I don't trust anything that those people put out. Nothing that comes out of their mouths can you trust because they're communists.
Exactly. And this is, I think, a key and important point because sometimes guys on Wall Street or Silicon Valley, they will say things like, well, we need to be sensitive to, you know, to foreign cultures. This is not about Chinese culture. I mean, look at the May Day parades they have in China. Up on those banners are Vladimir Lenin and Karl Marx. Those guys were born in Shanghai. The political system that exists in China does not resemble traditional Chinese political culture. It resembles the regimes that we saw in the Soviet Union, East Germany, we still see in Cuba. These are foreign dictatorial regimes run by a corrupt, abusive elite. The biggest victims of Chinese communism are the Chinese people themselves. So we need to dismiss that, and you are quite right. They are not to be trusted. These financial numbers about their financial performance, you cannot believe, you cannot agree with. They don't abide by the same accounting standards that our companies are required to do. And what President Xi is doing is, you know, arresting businessmen under the guise of fighting corruption. But, you know, seasoned observers note the only people that get arrested are his political opponents.
Right.
His allies and his friends that are engaging in corrupt behavior, by the way, that includes his own family, that has been documented, those people aren't being arrested. So when these oligarchs and Elon Musk and others have said this, that, oh, there's this good crackdown on corruption, they're not this naive and stupid. They know what's going on. They are covering up for the regime because the regime has done them big favors. You look at Tesla, you look at their statements they're issuing to shareholders, their entire future, largely as a corporate entity, is tied up with China, with building more factories, shifting their design studios there, selling to that large market. So for all of Elon Musk's sort of hubris, he is at the beck and call of Beijing, and his statements about China prove it.
Is he getting more subsidies and money from the Fed or from China? Because I've been, look, I like this guy culturally. I think he's interesting, and he's a Gen X. He's a Gen Xer, and I just think that he's an interesting guy. However, I just look at the money that he's getting in subsidies from DC and also from China. I don't know where he's getting more money from, and I just think to myself, this guy's beholden to somebody.
Yeah, no, he is. And look, I mean, here's the thing about Elon Musk that's disappointing to me is you're right. I mean, he's very outspoken on a lot of issues. He used to be very critical of China. In 2016, he talked about he was going to build, I forget the name of it, he was going to build a system for worldwide global internet access based on satellites that he's going to launch and put around the planet. He joked on Twitter about, yeah, I'm going to put satellites, but the ones over China are probably going to be shot down by the Chinese. you know, very apt and accurate statement. And in 2017, he was tweeting about how China was unfair when it came to the taxes and the tariffs they were putting on the export of cars like his Tesla to China. Well, his tone has changed 180 degrees. It is completely different than what it was. What happened in between is China built him a massive factory. They financed it for him. They built a massive factory in less than a year. Because again, you don't have to worry about property rights. The environmental standards are different. And he liked that. And now he's starting to shift. His design studios, which he used to swear were always going to be kept in California, they're going to be moving to China. He is on the hook with Beijing, hook, line, and sinker. And he's no longer, when it comes to China issues, an independent thinker the way that he used to be.
That's too bad. Because I really like what he's doing. I like the direction. I love that Cybertruck. I love to own one.
Yeah, no, he's fun. I mean, he's so likable. It's so disappointing because here's a guy that's worth, depending what Tesla stock's do, it's worth more than $200 billion a year. You don't need China, and yet he chose to get in bed with China.
It's really strange. Something else, you're talking about Marxism and Leninism, and I saw an interview with Klaus Schwab the other day, and he had a bust of Lenin behind him. And I just think to myself, all these people who were talking about the Great Reset, all these elites, they're all globalists, the Party of Davos, the World Economic Forum, all these people, are they victims of elite capture? Because I can see China loving the Great Reset because they'll never be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people that talk about these sort of large global schemes, Bill Gates being an example of it, in my mind are subject to elite capture. If you look at Bill Gates, again, one of the richest men in the world, he invests in Chinese companies that develop military technologies that are going to be aimed at us. He invested in a scheme to develop, it was called TerraPower, to develop small nuclear reactors in China. The American military pointed out that those reactors can be put on submarines and aircraft carriers. And in 2019, the federal government had to intervene to stop him from doing it. But even after all of that came out, he was still hopeful that, I can still get back to those reactors and work with the Chinese government. I mean, it's either absolute naivete or he is not particularly concerned about the threat and what China represents and what China's ambitions are. And that's not because China's not enunciating them. President Xi's been very outspoken. He wants to surpass the United States. He views the technological race as a war with the United States that he wants to win. And you have some of the best and the brightest in our country who are literally aiding and abetting Beijing in their race with us. It's astonishing. And a lot of them, like Bill Gates, like Klaus Schwab, are wrapped up with these sort of grand schemes of how they're going to reorganize the world, sometimes, frankly, in ways that resemble China more than they resemble the United States.
Last question. In the final analysis, what exactly can be done about all this? And why won't Republicans do anything about this? And do you think if we, it looks like we're more than likely going to take back the House and the Senate, do you have any faith they're going to do anything about this or hold hearings or... I mean, I know they'll hold hearings, but will they pass any laws or do anything to curb this or to make elite capture less of a possibility for themselves?
They say they're going to. So I want to take people for their word, even in Washington, D.C., where talk is cheap. Really, it comes down to you've got to elect leaders and you've got to hold those leaders into account. So in that sense, I'm hopeful that we will get a new group of elected officials coming in after November who will address these issues. I would say on a personal level to people, there are simple things that you can do that actually do make a difference. I would say, number one, look at the products you're buying, especially if you're buying Chinese electronics. You are likely sending money to a company that is also building military components for the Chinese military, and those components are going to be aimed at us. So stop doing it. The second thing I would say is look at your investments. I thought there's no way that I'm investing in Chinese companies, but when you look at some of the mutual funds, if you have a world investment fund or an emerging markets investment fund, I looked at one of mine, 40% of the money in that mutual fund was being invested in Chinese companies, many of which were involved in doing military work for the Chinese military. So look at your investments and purge them of any mutual funds or investment funds that are invested in Chinese companies. That is actually, if you can get that done, being done on a cumulative level, that is actually a very powerful way we can vote with our dollars and stick it to the CCP.
That's a great idea. I'm in the process with a friend buying a new washer and dryer, and I said, no LG. Don't go there. No LG. I said, pick something if you have to, from South Korea. I mean, they're great people. But really, I mean, honestly, it's just flipping the product over or doing a little bit of investigation and seeing where it comes from. And you're going to find more than likely an American product or product from somewhere else, even if it's like Indonesia, that might be the same price or a little bit more expensive. But I think it's worth it because I just think that we're in a Cold War with China and we're in a financial one. We need to be acting like it.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Well, sadly, we're out of time. Peter, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Where can people pick up the book? I know Amazon, obviously, but is there somewhere else where they can pick it up?
Yeah, it should be in most bookstores, everything from Barnes & Noble to Costco. They also have it at barnesandnoble.com. It should be widely available. And love to get people's feedback. You can go to thedrilldown.com, which is a site for my podcast. And you can also contact me through peterschweizer.com.
Awesome. What's your social media coordinates so everyone can find you online?
I'm at Twitter at Peter Schweizer, and you can also, I have a page on Facebook where I update on activities, research, and the work that we're doing.
Okay, and what's going on with the podcast? Is that weekly or is that monthly? What's the frequency?
It's weekly. It's weekly. It's 25 minutes. We're a week. We're focused exclusively on cronyism and corruption in Washington, D.C. and all of its aspects. Sometimes we have guests. Oftentimes, it's us revealing some of the new research and projects that we're working on here.
Okay, and where can people find the podcast?
You can find that everywhere, Spotify, Apple Music, and you can also find it at thedrilldown.com. You can subscribe there as well.
Awesome. Perfect. All right, everyone, make sure and check out thepoliticalinsider.com and subscribe to our newsletter. Also, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please like and share this video far and wide. Subscribe to the Political Insider channel on Rumble and YouTube, especially Rumble, so you never miss out on any of our new videos. Until next time, everyone keep the faith, stay frosty, and thanks again. Thanks, Peter. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, brother. Take care.